you guys for joining us today. Today we are going to be talking about collaborative docs, and we're going to be talking about different applications that we can use within Google to work collaboratively, whether it's with our PLCs, with other colleagues, with students. So today's all about collaboration and working collaboratively.
Before we begin, just wanted to go over some housekeeping for our webinar. The chat button, that's where we've all been introducing ourselves and talking about what we're doing this upcoming weekend. If you have a question that you'd like to ask the entire group, go ahead and feel free to post it in the chat. If you'd like just to post it for Marshall and I, where we can answer it at the end during our Q&A session, you should find a Q&A button on your screen. Then you can go ahead and click that and type in your question there. Putting your question in the Q&A also allows you to ask it anonymously if you would like. If you can't find the Q&A section, that's okay. Just go ahead and type your question in the chat and we'll get to it when we can.
Okay, so what is a collaborative doc? So we're going to talk about what that actually is. So collaborative doc is anything within Google where multiple people can be working on the same project at the same time. So it allows creativity, allows communication, allows collaboration with peers all around an activity that is involving critical thinking. So collaborative docs, and I know we called it collaborative docs, but it's more than just docs. So you can do collaborative work in docs, in sheets, slides, Google Forms, Jamboard, just to name a few. And so anything that people are working on it at the exact same time, or multiple people are working on something, that would be an example of a collaborative doc.
So how do my students work in groups? That's the one main thing that we want to figure out, especially with technology. So there's a few ways that you can actually share these documents, and we say documents like we say Kleenex. So even though I say Kleenex, it's all facial tissue, no matter what brand I buy. So even though we say a collaborative doc, it doesn't have to be a Google Doc. It could be a Google slide or a Google Sheet. Mm-hmm. So how could I share this with my students? One way is that you don't do anything at all. You just give your students what it is that you want. I want you to come up with a type of research project all about astronauts or all about different missions going into outer space. And that's all that you say. They then could come up with a Google slide, a Google Doc, a Google Sheet, a Jamboard, or a movie, anything it is that they want to create. And they have the responsibility of sharing it with each other. I have seen this work in 5th grade and up, where one person in the group, they are responsible for just opening up the initial document. The student hits the share button, and then the student types in the email addresses or just the name of the people within their group. So they would see a share button in the upper right-hand corner, and then they would type in the name under where it says people. So you can see in this box that I shared something with Marshall, and all I did was type his name in, and it shows me that I shared it with him. So if I had other people within my group as well, I could then type their names in that box and they would all get it. So it takes a lot of pressure off of you as a teacher and puts it on the students. That way they have that responsibility and they learn and understand what it means to share a document and how that works.
And because we have it set up within our domain, that's why we're able to just start typing in people's names and then their email addresses pop up and we just click on it and boom, we're done. So if it's, outside, like when I was in college and stuff, doing stuff like that, I had to actually type in the person's email address. But because we have it all set up within our domain, you just start typing in a person's name, it finds them in our global address book, throws their email address in there, and then you're good to go. Another way that we can do this is we can assign it to groups within Google Classroom. And so I, as the teacher, could create the assignment in Classroom and only send the assignment to maybe the group leaders. So when I'm going through and I'm creating an assignment, by default, it's going to say all students, but then I can go through and I can choose which students I want to send it to. So then I can send it to the group leaders. So maybe I have 6 groups. I would maybe send that out to those 6 group leaders, and then they can go in and they can do what Satara just walked through and click the share button, add their group members to the assignment. So that's kind of another way that you can do it. If you're working with younger groups, K1, 2, 3, 4, you might want to go through and you might want to just share it with the whole group instead of the group leader.
And then how would you set up your entire class on one document or slide, sheet, or Jamboard? So let's say you want your entire class to work together. You're taking data, and instead of writing it on the whiteboard, our whiteboard markers are dry, or we have other things on our whiteboard, or we're using the projector screen as well. Well, we don't have to just be tied to one thing. We can actually take all of our class data on one document. So I could have a Google Sheet going, and I could have all of my students writing in all of the data that they're taking with each other. What I would do is I would go to Google Classroom, and when I create an assignment, after I add in that assignment and I'm adding it in from my Google Drive, I would want to choose students can edit. So that choice is only going to come up after you actually attach a file to the Google Classroom assignment. Once you attach a file to the Google Classroom assignment, that's where you're going to get those three options of students can view, students can edit, or make a copy. If you want your entire class to work together on one document, you want to give the students the ability to edit that file. So you want to say the students can edit. And then you'll be able to assign it to all students. Or if you only wanted a few students throughout the classroom to be responsible for entering in that information, you could click the all students and only select the specific designated students whose classroom job it is to actually go up to the board and write the data. Well, their job would now be to go in the computer and put the data in on that collaborative doc.
So collaborative Google Docs. So we're going to talk about Google Docs specifically first here. So students can share documents with each other and they can all be working on it at the same time. So maybe some examples that we have here are maybe they are writing a collaborative story together. Maybe they're writing a collaborative essay. Maybe they're doing some grammar practice. So maybe I've typed up my sentences and then now I'm going to share it with Satara, and Satara is going to go through and she's going to kind of look at my work and we're going to be practicing some grammar and stuff together. Maybe we're doing some type of science explanation. So together we're doing some science experiment and we're coming up with the explanations together. Maybe we're doing a history report. So maybe we're doing a report on missions or Native Americans or something like that. And we're working on that together. We can be inserting tables together. We can be inserting pictures to help explain. So we can be working on this together right within the Google Doc, and it's just one document that we're both working on at the same time. So instead of maybe having like a poster board out that we're working on, now we're working on a digital kind of board or digital doc together. And so to do this, we could either, like we said, we could either share it with them in Google Classroom, or we can tell them, hey, you three are in a group together. You're the group leader. You create the doc, you share it. You click the share button in the top right. You share it with your group members and me. So I have, as the teacher, have access to it. And then they start working together. The nice thing with doing it through Google Classroom is that it automatically shares it with you. But if you are, let me back up, it'll automatically share it with you if you are putting in a template. If you are just telling them to make something, then you want to make sure that they're sharing it with their group members and also you, so then you have access to see it as they're working on it, so you can be providing real-time feedback to them.
And then another option, instead of like them sharing it with you, if you've made the assignment within Google Classroom, if they click on the assignment, there's a section where they can actually add or create. So then they click create in a Google Doc, or create in a Google Slide, or create in a Google Sheet. That way you're not getting bombarded with 180 something emails of kids sharing documents with you. It's all right through Google Classroom. So if you're having the students create something themselves and you want to see the work as it's progressing while they're working, but you gave them that autonomy to pick an app that you want, pick your group members, you gave them that autonomy, you can still say, I want you to create the document first from Google Classroom, from the assignment, because that would give you that type of teacher oversight where you could actually look at their progress throughout the entire project. So have them go to Google Classroom, click the add or create button, and then they can select what app they would like to use.
And then it's nice too for you and for them, because it's going to help keep things organized for them, so they know that document that I'm working on is attached to that assignment in Google Classroom, or it's going to be in that Google Classroom folder. If they're creating it on their own, it's just going to be living in their drive, so they could essentially, I mean, they can always find it, but it kind of helps organize it for you and for them too as well. And then, so we just wanted to kind of throw in some examples here of some ways. So we talked about some ways that they could be collaborative. Here are some other ways that they could be collaborative as well. So these are called hyperdocs, and all they really are is just a fancy word for a document that has a bunch of hyperlinks on it. And so these are 3 examples. So if you click on them, it should force you to make a copy of it, so then you can use it. You can see how it is, how I kind of set these up. But then it gives you an idea that you can kind of go through and create your own. So each of these have certain sections to them. So they're multiple page documents. And so like on some of these, I've linked to some videos that the students would watch, and then they would, like for this first one, it's a force and motion kind of unit. So they would watch a video and then they would write down like 5 things that they learned about force and motion. So instead of them doing that individually, this could be a doc that they're working on together. So they could be talking about it, they could be commenting, and then as a group, they're deciding what are the 5 things that we're going to write down. And then they can just go through these kind of activities and parts of the document together as a group instead of just doing it in isolation by themselves. So these are 3 examples that I put in here. There's a force and motion one, there's an Earth Day one, and then I made one for the Gold Rush because shocker, 4th grade teacher, that's what I made. So these are just some examples. There's also a link. I'm trying to think if we put it on here or not. If not, I'll make sure to put it on this page where HyperDocs has like a website, and they have a whole library of different documents and different templates and stuff that you can use. That's where I got these. And so they have them all organized by subject and stuff. So you can go there and you can pull templates and examples of ones that you can use in your classroom.
And so the next thing we're going to talk about is Google Draw. Google Draw is one of the apps that's a part of Google, and it's completely different but also the same with all the other apps. So the main function of Google Draw is you can put an image together, or you can put a page together, you can put any type of graphic you want, you can even write on this. But with Google Draw, you can save it as an image file. So you can save it as a JPEG, you can save it as a PNG, so you can save it as an image file, and you can use Google Draw to create different banners, to create different like buttons or stickers, anything. And Google Draw can also be collaborative. So you can have your students share this with each other, and they can create image files that keep their quality, or posters, or something that you would do in Google Slides. You could just do it in Google Draw instead. And if you're using Google Docs, it's really hard to kind of input a picture in Google Docs compared to Word. With Word, your picture's right in there, you can move it around. But with Google Docs, it's kind of hard. You have to actually go through multiple steps to put a picture in there. So if you're having your students do something where they're inputting pictures, Google Draw might be the best option because they can write in here as well.
And then Google Draw is nice too if you wanted to have for like graphic organizers and like kind of brainstorming. It's also a nice kind of platform that you can use to have the students kind of go through and maybe do some storyboarding or just some brainstorming with graphic organizers and stuff. You can create those within Google Drawings as well.
And so here's just a page of the different ideas for classroom use that, like Marshall had just mentioned. And so your students could create a flow chart. They could brainstorm ideas. They could explain magnetism through including diagrams with arrows. They could put words. They could explain math equations. They could explain a pH scale, or they could put a picture of a fish tank and then explain everything that's going on with it. So we have a few examples of these are just pictures. So one is a student actually completing the life cycle of a butterfly. The one next to that where you see love, that's just the students putting a collage together of a lot of pictures that go along with the subject. And then you'll see one where you see my Bitmoji. So I was interviewed by a student, and this is how they put together their work. They did it in Google Draw with a bunch of images and pictures of my Bitmoji that I had shared with them. So they took something, instead of making it a Google Doc in a formal interview, they used their creativeness to put this together. Then there's a parts of a cell that the students are dragging. And then you could create something where students are going over sight words, where they're putting a picture and a sentence. And then the last one is where the students are ordering different, they're ordering like the different fractions in order of least to greatest. And that actually went with a breakout room for fractions. And so the students kind of drag everything and they put it in order, and all those shapes correspond to a code that they had to put in a Google form. So they were breaking out of the room. So these are just pictures of samples that we gave, but there's so many different ideas for using Google Draw.
Next is collaborative Google Forms. And so students can share forms with each other so they can work on them at the same time. It works a little differently than sharing like a doc or a slides or something. You'll still see like the person at the top, and then on each question, like their color kind of pops up on the side so you know where they're working. So students can work on surveys together. They can create their own choose your own adventure story together. They can make their own escape room together in groups. So it's really cool for them to be able to kind of work on this collaboratively, because I think a lot of students thinks that like Google Forms is just something that teachers do. And so giving them like that tool that is kind of a quote unquote sacred tool that students aren't supposed to use, it builds up their excitement a little bit too. So they can also be collaborative in Google Forms.
And then if you've ever like done an escape room with your students, and once they start understanding how it works and then you have them create it, it's going to be so much fun. And the buy-in when you actually do even more of these escape rooms with Google Forms is just going to increase.
Yeah.
And so now we just wanted to talk about collaborative Google Sheets. So Google Sheets is just a spreadsheet, but it's so much more. So students can share the sheet with others just by hitting the share button, but they could create group data tables. They could create pixel art stories. That should say stories, so I missed an I. The students can write together. They can collect data. They can analyze data together. I know one huge thing that we're working on in secondary level is having students actually being able to analyze and explain data that they see, because they don't really know what they're seeing. And especially right now when we're being surrounded by graphs on every single TV station about COVID-19, Google Sheets is something amazing to utilize. That way the students are putting data there, or they're inputting a graph and they're writing right next to it. That way they're explaining their thought process.
And so here are some examples of some pixel art that students could be working on collaboratively together. And so the first one is make a Valentine's heart. So depending on what letters they type in, it's going to give them different colors. So they could make a heart, which is what the directions are telling them to do. And then as a group, they could be writing their story in that kind of beige area. Same thing with the pixel art and writing at the bottom. They can be creating an art piece and then doing the writing piece together. And then the room design one is all about area and perimeter and stuff, and they have to be able to fit those pieces of furniture in their room. So as a group, they can be going through and they can be analyzing this, and they can be deciding, okay, what's going to be the best spot for each piece of furniture, and figuring out the area and all that stuff together instead of just doing it in isolation.
And then collaborative Google Slides. Google Slides is amazing because it is so collaborative. You can just do entrance and exit tickets as a teacher. There's so many checking for understandings that you could do with Google Slides, but then you could have students create posters, pamphlets, trifolds. So instead of getting those actual physical trifold boards, you can just take the size and resize a Google slide for it. Students can make a web page with Google Slides. They can make an ebook, a portfolio, a homework, museum kiosk. There's so much. And so by showing students some examples and showing them that Google Slides isn't just a presentation tool, they can be so creative and use their critical thinking skills to address a problem or a concept that we give them, but in a completely different way. A student could even do a presentation with just pictures and no words. And that way they're using these marketing skills, and these are things that they need outside of the classroom. So these skills directly translate to real life jobs.
So speaking of doing a presentation with no words, actually the last conference that I went to back in October, actually went to a session that a guy gave his presentation, and it was only pictures, and like each slide had one image on it, but he obviously had to know what he was talking about because he couldn't refer to any words or anything like that. But like it was the most entertaining, and it was all about podcasting, but it was podcasting with ELs. And but it was awesome that he just his whole presentation was just a single image, and that image represented the specific topic that he was going to be talking about. And then he just did his thing, but it was great. I mean, it kind of, like if I wanted to like take notes, like I had to be doing notes. I couldn't just pull stuff from his slide, but I mean, I was so captivated that I didn't have to worry about that. But I thought it was really cool. It was the first time I'd ever been in a presentation where there was no words on the slide. And so here are some ideas for classroom work. And so using slides, you can go through and you can set up where each slide is a specific color. And then you can have the students and then the groups, you could say, okay, group 1, you are using the red slide. Group 2, you are using the blue slide. Group 3, so on and so forth. And you can set this up with editing the master. We talked about these in our PD on Tuesday, where we talked about beyond Google Slides, and we kind of went more in depth on those things. So if you wanted to refer back to that episode to get more ideas and stuff, you definitely can. And so this is a kind of template that was set up where we edited the master and we just had it where each group was a specific color. And so if the group's working, group 1's working, and they run out of room on their one slide, well, they can just go through like they would normally add a slide, and they would click that plus sign. Next to it, there's a little down arrow. They would click the down arrow. They would find their red slide number 1, add it, and they would just continue working. And then it's nice for them, especially if this is the first time that they've ever done something collaboratively. Those of you who've tried to do collaborative Google Slides before, at first, sometimes it can be a little bit of a hot mess because kids are kind of all over the place. So this helps them keep them organized. They know I'm in group 1, my slide should be red. I'm in group 2, my slide should be blue. So it kind of helps them stay where they're supposed to be. And then as a teacher, as we're kind of circling the classroom and we're monitoring, I know this over here is my group 1. Everyone should have a red slide. Why do you have a purple slide? Like, you need to make sure that you're in where you're supposed to be. And because we edited this on the master, they can't go in and they can't change the colors and stuff. So we know that they are where they're supposed to be. So this is kind of a nice way to kind of start them off with working in slides collaboratively. You would assign this in Google Classroom like we showed, where you would say the class can edit. So then everyone is working at the same time on this particular slide.
And then I just wanted to add a little bit to this. So this could be used as an entrance or exit ticket, or this can be used as just a bulk of the lesson for that day. So your students could come in and you could say, okay, go ahead and open up Google Classroom. Group leaders, you'll see what I shared with you. You can find the group leaders on the board so the group leaders know who everybody is. Or if you're sharing this with all the students, I've posted this in Google Classroom. You guys know what groups you're in because most of the time we have them in groups. You know what colors you are because most of the time we associate the groups with colors. But if not, I could say group 1, you're red. Group 2, you're blue. Group 3, you're green. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead and just put some pictures together and explain to me only with pictures what we did yesterday or what concept we were working on yesterday. And so that's what the groups would do. I would have a timer going for 5 minutes. That's what they would do in the beginning. And as we keep doing this, it would be something that I wouldn't even have to explain to them every day. They would just see my agenda on the board and they would see, oh, okay, our entrance ticket is a Google Classroom slide. So they would go to Google Classroom. They would go in the classwork and they would see that I had a section, a topic titled Due Today with the date. And so they would know what it is specifically that I'm asking them to do. And then so some other ideas for using Google Slides for collaboration is journaling and book creation. So you could have students record their thoughts or write a story, especially right now with everything that's going on, what they're feeling, what they're going through, what they're seeing. So they could create an ebook with Google Slides. They could do a Google site where you have multiple students working together creating a Google site. That's actually what Marshall and I used for our Tech and TUSD. It's a Google site that both of us use collaboratively. And when we're both editing, we can see each other on their editing. Or we can create a newspaper using the slide templates. We can create magazines from slide templates. So there's a lot of different things that you could do. We just can repurpose it. So I can use a web page for a journal. I can just use it as like a blog. I can use a Google slide, but create an ebook or just create a one-page informational worksheet, just depending on how I want to set it up.
And so on here, we have the newspaper and the magazine templates. These are all hyperlinked for you guys. So all you have to do is click on it, make a copy, and then now you have that template that you can manipulate, and you can get rid of things, you can add things, and you can make it your own. So we've hyperlinked those there for you. So to do this in slides, you would want to resize it so it's maybe the size of a piece of paper, or maybe you wanted to make a poster and you want it to be a, 3 foot by 4 foot poster or something. You can go through and you can change the size of the slide. So what you're going to do to do that, you're going to go through and you're going to go to File, Page Setup, and then a window is going to pop up. It's going to, by default, it's set to widescreen, but then you're going to want to click on that, and then you're going to want to choose Custom. And then when you go to Custom, you can change it to whatever size you want. By default, it's set to inches, but maybe you are wanting to make something and you have to set it up by certain pixels. So I've gone through and I've created some stickers for myself my like tech stickers, and I created them in Google Slides. And they, when I had to send them off, they had to be certain pixel lengths. So it had to be 600 pixels by 600 pixels. So instead of it being by inches, I set it up by pixels. So you can kind of customize this however you like, whatever size you want. And then you can go through and you can make your book, you can make your poster, or whatever you're wanting the students to create in slides.
And so collaborative Google Sites. Google Site is just what Google calls a website or a web page. They call it a Google Site. So you can have students share and co-create a website using Google Sites. They could create a portfolio. They could create a virtual escape room with an embedded form. They could create any type of form to showcase what's happening at school or at their site. If you run a club, you could have students working on, well, let's make a website for our club. If you have a website as a teacher, you can actually designate a student to update your website with what's going on. I had a student in my classroom who would update the date on the board for me, who would update the homework on the board for me. So why couldn't I have a student that could also update my website? So definitely work with these students, utilize their talents. You have students that love to code, that love to create, that like web design. So give them the avenues that they can to create it. Maybe if you're having them do a Google slide, we'll give them an option, a Google slide, a Google site, a Google sheet. Tell them that they can do whatever it is that they want to create. Because a Google site, it has templates already built in that make it really, really easy, but they could also make it their own.
Mm-hmm. And then the nice thing too is that it doesn't have to be a site that's necessarily published to the public where anybody can go to it. You can share it with specific people. So you can literally have a site that only your class can go to. So you don't have to worry about their stuff just being out there for any person to see. And then if you did make a site that was published publicly, so maybe like parents and stuff could access it, you would just want to make sure that you're being cognizant of student privacy and making sure we don't post like first names, last names, stuff like that, anything that's going to be able to identify the students by somebody going and visiting this particular site. So just know that just because they're making a website doesn't mean it has to be published publicly. And if it is published publicly, make sure that we're just being cognizant of student data privacy. So how would I access all of this stuff, all the things that we've been talking about? How do I get to it? So it's all of it. You can, it all lives in your Drive. You can access it through your Google Drive. So you just log into your TUSD Google account. You can click on the waffle, and then you can go to Drive. From there, in the top left-hand corner, you're going to have your New button. And by default, it just shows, after you click on New, it's going to ask for, gives you the option to do a file upload, folder upload. But then if you go down a little bit, the three options that they give you is Docs, Sheets, and Slides, because those are kind of the three most common applications that people use in Google Drive. And then we always kind of joke around that all the good stuff is hidden under the More section. So if you click on More, that's where you can get to your Google Forms, your Google Drawings, your Google Sites, your Jamboards. Those things are all kind of hidden under the More section. So you would just go there, and this is where they can go, or this is where you can go to create docs, sheets, slides, forms, drawings, sites. It all lives in your Google Drive, and then you just have to share it. So you tell them to create whatever application you're wanting them to use, or you just give them, like we've talked about before, you give them the subject. I want you to create something that explains this concept, and then they can choose. They can choose if they want to do a collaborative doc. They can choose if they want to make a collaborative slide. They can choose if they want to make a collaborative drawings or a site. You give them that choice and let them kind of use their creativity as best as they see fit. And then they can just access it through here, and then they go through the sharing process and they share it with the people in their group. All right, so that is all that we have for you guys today. We thank you guys for joining us. Next week, we are going to be back on Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about Kahoot and quizzes. So this PD was based off of feedback that we received from you guys. And so we're going to talk about Kahoot and quizzes. We're going to talk about some of the similarities, some of the differences, ways that we can use it to check for understanding. And then we're going to kind of dive into these two specific platforms. And then hopefully when you're done with this, you can see, okay, I would like to use this one or that one, or maybe you see I could use Kahoot for some things, quizzes for other things. So we're just going to kind of dive into these two platforms and use them to show how we can check for understanding with our students and stuff. So that's what we're going to cover next week. We thank you guys for joining us, and we are now going to jump into the Q&A section of our webinar. So I'm going to...
So one of the questions that was put in the chat was, how do I use Google Slides as an exit or entrance ticket to check for understanding, or if they did their reading homework assignment? So what you could do is, let's say when the students first get to you, you already have the assignment posted in Google Classroom. So you have an assignment and you say, like, the assignment could be, I want you to put in 2 pictures and write 2 sentence summaries about the reading assignment from last night. And you have that already in there. You would attach a Google slide to it, and that's already in Google Classroom, assigned to everyone come Monday morning. That would be your entrance ticket. So right when the students come in, the first thing you have them do is they would work on that for 5 minutes while you're taking attendance, while you're making sure if people are coming in tardy, while you're getting things set up and ready to go. For an exit ticket, it's right before students leave. That's the last thing that they do. So put in a couple of pictures, and I always revert to pictures just because when students give me pictures, I really am able to see their understanding a lot better than if they're just writing sentences. And I feel that anybody can put in pictures, whereas writing sentences, all my students are at different levels. So my EL students might not be on the same page as, my higher up STEM kids. And I want to see everyone's understanding as equally as possible. So my students would have a choice of writing a sentence or putting in pictures, or I would just give them a choice and be like, this is what you're doing. So that could be something that you're doing with the last 5 minutes of class before they leave you to go to the next class, or at the end of the day for elementary teachers. At the end of the day, it could be, this is what you're doing. Here's 5 minutes. Go ahead and do this. And then when, the bell rings and they're done and they can leave.
Another question in the chat was, would I put the hyperdoc in classroom and groups would share amongst themselves for the group activity? So it depends on how you want to have it set up. So you can put it into classroom and you can share it with the group leaders, and then the group leaders would have to go and share it with their group members, or you can go beforehand and you can make, if I know I have 6 groups, I make 6 copies of that hyperdoc, and then I assign each copy to the specific group in Google Classroom. If you do that, I would just make sure that you name it so you know which hyperdoc is supposed to go to each group. So maybe if you're doing, like, for example, if you're going to do the hyperdoc on, the Gold Rush, let's say, I would do Gold Rush Hyperdoc Group 1, Gold Rush Hyperdoc Group 2. So then I know when I'm adding it to Google Classroom, I know I'm adding the right doc to the right group's assignment. And then in the chat, in the Q&A, someone said, can you please share the link for Hyperdocs? Yes, I'm going to put that on the slide, and I'll actually, if Satara wants to answer the next question, I'll find it and I'll throw it in the chat right now.
And then I also put in a link for a bunch of Google Draw resources on the collaborative Google Draw page, and that'll take you to a folder that has a ton of different resources in it. Another question we have is, If I want students to use a Venn diagram to organize their knowledge, would we suggest Google Hyperdocs, Draw, or other? How do I insert the Venn diagram? Is there a template? So if you want your students to complete a Venn diagram, there's two things that you could either do, either Google Draw or Google Slides. I would stick to, if you're only doing a Venn diagram and nothing else, Google Draw is fine. Template wise, there might be some templates that you could find in the folder. Otherwise, what you would do is you would just insert a shape and you would just insert two circles, or you could have them insert the circles and have them go through how to do that. So when you have a Google Draw, and what I'll do is I'll share my screen right now, and I will actually open up a Google Draw and I'll show you exactly how you would insert the Venn diagram. So let me make this full screen, share, pick me. Okay, so if I go to new, if my computer registers my click, if I go to new and then I go to more in Google Drawings, I would open up a brand new Google Draw. This would be what my students would see. Where it says untitled drawing, that's where I would put the title, and I could just put Venn diagram. And then when I say that you could insert a shape, where you see a circle and a square, that's a shape button. And you would click that and you would go to shapes and then just a circle. So I would hover over a circle and my mouse completely changes. How I handle this mouse now is this is telling me that I have a shape attached to it and I am now in the drawing function. So if I click and drag, I would get a circle, and then I can just copy and paste another circle right next to it, but it doesn't really look like a Venn diagram, nothing see-through. These circles are on the top of each other. So I could go to my paint can and I go to transparent. What that means is I can see one circle behind the other. So I click on the other circle, I go to transparent. I can then create a thicker line if I want to. I can create a blue line if I want to and create it thicker and make it dashed. So there's a few options, and then this would be what you would share. Now, I know you'd want to make this probably a little bigger. And how would the students then fill this out? Well, there's this T right here that says text box. You would click this and the students would drag it, the students would click it, the students would make a text box, and this is where they could type. And if you wanted to put a title for each side, so let's say that this was a plant cell and you're having your students talk about this one. So you could do this title for plant cell right over this, and then you could do the animal cell title right over the other one. Ooh. Animal. And I'm sorry, I always revert to science because I was a science teacher. And then they would fill this in. Now, let's say that they wanted to put pictures in there, because I saw someone had also asked a question of, well, how do students just pull in pictures? Because I was saying, well, all they do is they pull in pictures and they just drag them and they bring them. Every single Google application has a mountain. And I always call it a mountain because the kids know right away. I go click on the mountain. The mountain is this image right here. It's a black background with a white mountain. They click on it and it gives them some options. Upload from the computer or search from web. I always tell them to click search from web. And then on the right-hand side, Google pops up. So I can put in a picture and I can type plant cell. They would click and drag. And after like 5 to 10 seconds, the picture comes here. Then they just resize it and they move it where they want. They can click multiple pictures. Let's say they just wanted to click it. You'll see down here, it says I selected 2 pictures. And if I hit insert, both pictures will show up. And then I'll be able to click them and move them. So this is a picture of a cell cake. And then also I'll be able to click the pictures and move them around. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. I added the links to the HyperDoc template page in the chat for you guys. They also have like examples too. So the templates ones is just they're blank, but they also have an example section in there as well. Let's see. So I did that. So another question was, what is Google Apps Script? So when you go to your drive, click new, go down to more. One of the options is Google Apps Script. So that's basically where you can like set up some code and some script for either slides or docs or something to kind of automatically do things for you. I haven't played much with it, but I know there are some other teachers who kind of set up some script where depending on what they do or what they click on, it's going to kind of automatically do some things for them.
So it's just a way for you to change and program Google Docs or any type of Google application to do what you want if it doesn't already do it. And it's really nice to show it to a student and say, okay, I want, like if they're complaining about something that Google Docs doesn't have or Google Slides doesn't have, you'd be like, okay, well, here you go. Google made something called Google Apps Script, figure it out. And that's all you say, especially to the secondary students, and they try to figure it out. And it's something that, especially once they learn the coding, it will take them so far because everything in the future is going towards coding, or a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Bitmoji. That's a question.
Please explain a Bitmoji and how we get these. Okay, so a Bitmoji is an application that you can do to kind of create a, I guess, for lack of a better term, a cartoon kind of version of yourself. And then, so it's an app that you can download, and then you would go through and you would design like the hair, like I obviously added glasses to mine, those types of things. And then it's an app on your phone that you can use. So then you can copy those images, you can insert them into docs and stuff. We actually enabled the extension on Chrome. So once you've gone through and you've kind of created your things, you can go to the Chrome extension, you can pull in your Bitmoji into slides or docs or whatever, like we have done in our presentations. So that's what a Bitmoji is.
Show you the extension. So this is where once you add the extension, it'll show here. And because I already have an account created, I can just click on the little Bitmoji extension and I can search, and it'll give me a ton of pictures here. But I had to create my account myself. So I just did it on my phone. I spent way too long on it, of course. But you can, if you have Snapchat or if your kids have Snapchat, Bitmoji is integrated within Snapchat as well, and it's integrated with a lot of other things where you can just pull your Bitmojis. And then if you have and get Bitmoji on your phone, you can actually text with your Bitmojis too. Mm-hmm. So and you can like respond with different Bitmojis that way as well.
Another question is, when will Loom be available as a Chrome extension? I'll check on that because I know it should be, but I'll check on that today. I'm gonna write a note right now. Okay. Yeah, because that was approved already, so it should be enabled, but I'll check on that. You mentioned pixel art. Can you give examples?
Yes. So pixel art is where you're using a Google Sheet and you're programming a Google Sheet to essentially anytime you type in something, whether it's one letter or one number, that actual box changes a color. So I'll look for one in my drive right now. I don't know where I would have put it.
So while she's looking for that, I'll try to go through and explain a little bit too. So like she said, you can set it up where depending on there's some like conditional formatting and things that go into it, but depending on what you type, that cell will turn a specific color. So I'm sure when you guys were filling out the sheet that you had to do to like make contact with parents during this time, you might have noticed that the one column where it said like yes, I left a message, or yes, I was able to make contact, depending on what it showed, your whole row turned a certain color. So I set that up with conditional formatting that depending on what was in that cell, it turned the row a specific color. And so you doing pixel art, you can set it up where depending on what number or what letter they type in a cell, it turns that specific cell a certain color. We've also talked about using it in like review, so you could have problems there. And if you can set it up where that cell is supposed to have, so for example, if you're doing some math problems, you can set up where the cell is supposed to have the right answer. And then like maybe they're going through answering questions, but then their answers are creating a picture on the side. And so maybe they're creating a flower. But if the flower doesn't look right, or if like parts of the flower are gray or black because the answers that they chose were not right, then they know, okay, there's certain answers aren't right. So I can go back and kind of fix them that way too.
And so this is an example of like a Valentine's heart. So this was back in February. So the directions say in the boxes below, make a Valentine heart. Write each letter of the word Valentine with 1 letter per box to see the color choices you have to work with. So what I did was if you write the letter V and you hit enter, that box changes the color. But what I did above it is I wrote the letter V and then a period afterwards, because since it has more than just the letter V in it, it wouldn't change to be a different color, because I did the conditional formatting that says that if only a V is in the box, then it'll change a different color. So if there's an A in the box, it'll be a pink. If it's L, it'll be like a maroon. And how I did that was I just went to, what's it under? Insert, data, format. So if I go to format and then conditional formatting, it'll pull up this on the side and you'll see all of the different programming that's here. But how I would set it up was, let's say I wanted to add another rule. And I want to, right here where it says apply to a range, I want to actually apply it to the entire sheet. So I would click this. I would say the entire sheet here. So 1 to 1000, and I hit OK. So whatever I'm going to do, it's going to apply to the entire sheet. So I want to format the cell if the text is exactly. So let's say that a student types in the letter X. I want the box to become, what color? Blue. And if I don't want the X to show, I want the X to act like it disappears. I'm going to change the color of the X as well to match. Is that the color I use? No. And you'll notice right here above that it says custom and then the color. So I didn't pick the right color. I didn't pick the right blue. Oh, I didn't pick the right blue again. So like if I pick a pink, you'll see that it shows me what the box is going to look like. That way I know, well, am I picking the right color or not? So if I can find the right blue, then this
click on the paint can and then you'll see which one that you chose.
Oh, okay, third row. Ha, thanks.
There you go. Yep.
And then it goes away. And then I hit done. And so right here it says if text is exactly X. So I can type anywhere just the letter X, and then it should change. Text is exactly A1 to BZ.
It's going through, like I can see it. It's.
Oh, it was thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, there it goes.
There it goes.
So it was thinking. So I just needed to be patient and not be like my students and be like, well, 2 seconds went by, I didn't do it. so that is just really quick, fast pixel art. And I've seen this done in multiple classrooms and the kids love it. It reminds them a lot of Minecraft, and where everything is just in boxes. So they make a little image and a picture and then they write a story about it.
Okay. Are there any other questions that anybody has? Okay. Well, if you guys have any questions that you think of after this session, make sure to email Satara and I, and we'd be more than happy to help you guys out. We hope you guys have a great Friday and have a great weekend, and we will see you all next week.
Bye.